makers within the department that this authority exists. Over the past 5 years, the department has only used this authority 4 times. The Government Accountability Office released a report today that is critical to the department's processes and makes several recommendations for improvements. I would hope the department will expeditiously implement these recommendations. We're prepared to help, if necessary, legislatively. Finally, I again want to ensure the men and women in uniform and their families that while the acquisition process has oftentimes been inefficient and duplicative, it has provided the best equipment available to our warfighters. Before we begin, I would like to turn to my good friend and colleague from Texas, Sylvester Reyes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And today's hearing covers the critical topic of how the Department of Defense fills urgent warfighter needs from the field. This subcommittee has always operated in a bipartisan manner that focuses on the needs of the troops in the field. So I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing on this vital issue. And this being our first hearing, I hope it underscores the importance of this topic. For the purposes of providing oversight to DoD and the military services on this issue, I think this subcommittee must focus on 2 key areas. One issue is the efficiency, as you mentioned, of responding to the operational needs of warfighters in a way that avoids wasting money. While efficiency is important and is always something that we should focus on, I think it comes in a distant second to the other critical issue, which is speed. The speed of DoD's responses to urgent operational needs in the field. In other words, the warfighters and their needs. To me, this is the overriding issue that we face, because getting a capability into the hands of a soldier, even if it isn't the perfect solution or the most affordable, can and often does save lives. We saw this with the process DoD went through to get MRAPs in the field. In the end, it took Congress and Secretary Gates constantly pushing to get these life-saving vehicles deployed. That regrettably should not have been the case, but it's something hopefully we can all learn from. But after reading, as you mentioned, GAO's testimony on this issue for today's hearing, I am not entirely sure that the Defense Department and the military services have fully appreciated and learned the lessons they should have from the MRAP program. Well, I have no doubt that service members and civilians alike at the Pentagon are doing the very best that they can to act quickly and that they are working hard every single day. It appears that the system, as we all talk about, the system for responding to urgent needs has become overly onerous, complex, bureaucratic, and slow. GAO identified at least 30 different organizations in the Department of Defense involved in responding to these urgent operational needs. They also point out that no single high-ranking individual is in charge. This is a critical lesson learned from the MRAP program. Given the massive amounts of funding involved, at least $76 billion since 2005, and then the urgency of the needs, it is not acceptable, simply not acceptable, to have the level of fragmentation and overlap that GAO has reported and found in their study. In addition to understanding what needs to happen with DoD, today's hearing will hopefully also help our subcommittee identify where Congress can act to improve the system, whether through changes in how we provide funding or the authorities given to the military services. This needs to be a team effort between Congress and DoD. So again, Mr. Chairman, thank you for calling this hearing on this vital and critical issue, and I look forward to working with you on the topic as we build a National Defense Authorization Act for the year 2012.
Thank you very much. 2 bells followed by 5 bells means a series of votes is on. We have perhaps 10 minutes or so before we need to leave, at about 2 minutes before the vote is scheduled to close, so that we can get our vote in. So we can begin your testimony. Depending on how long your testimony is, we can have testimony from one of you or from both of you. I want to thank you very much for coming today. Mr. Tom D., Director, Joint Rapid Acquisition Cell. Mr. D. is also representing Deputy Secretary of Defense William Lynn and the Department's Chief Management Office. And Mr. Bill Solis, Director, Defense Capabilities and Management, Government Accountability Office. We will proceed with the panel's testimony. much as we can before we need to go to vote. And without objection, all the witnesses' prepared statements will be included in the hearing record. Thank you, sir. We may begin.
Chairman Bartlett, Ranking Member Reyes, members of the Tactical Air and Land Subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the Department of Defense's urgent operational needs processes. The experience of war has taught us that new enemy weapons and tactics will emerge in times of conflict, and that we will not always have existing capability or capacity to adequately counter those new threats. Addressing those unanticipated threats is the underlying purpose of the Department's urgent needs processes. As is the case for our deliberate requirements and resource allocation processes, JCIDS, the Joint Capabilities Integration Development System, PPBS, Planning, Programming, Budgeting, and Execution System, and the acquisition processes, the urgent needs process is comprised of three main elements: deciding what you need, the requirements, providing adequate resources to buy it, the programming and the budgeting, and assessing alternatives and executing a solution, the acquisition process, to include the operation and maintenance. A fourth critical step, fielding, is also vitally important to address, since this can be the limiting factor in a contingency situation and will shape the suitability of any proposed solution. The challenge for the JUONS process is how to execute each element on a much more compressed timeline, often in the absence of well-defined requirements, supporting CONOPS and doctrine, and/or supporting operations and maintenance concepts. Working under such compressed timelines, the Department necessarily accepts some higher level of programmatic risk in the traditional areas of cost, schedule, and performance. In time of war, schedule often becomes the risk that is least acceptable because the speed at which something can be fielded, even if it is only a mitigating capability, is often the most relevant factor in reducing the commander's operational risk. And not surprisingly, therefore, the commander's assessment of his operational risk is where the urgent needs process begins. As you pointed out, and as identified in a recent GAO study, there are multiple mechanisms through which a commander can submit an urgent operational needs request. Appropriately under Title X responsibilities, the service components have all established processes to facilitate a timely response to identified warfighter needs. In cases where a commander identifies the need as joint, the combatant commander certifies the requirement and forwards it to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for validation as a joint urgent operational need. The Joint Staff Director for Force Structure, Resources, and Assessments, the J8, uses its established functional capability boards to assess both the validity and the urgency of the requirement. Should the Joint Staff J8 Deputy Director for Requirements, the DDR, determine that the need is valid and that it is urgent, he passes it to me as the Director of OSD's Joint Rapid Acquisition Cell. I, in turn, coordinate with the service components, JITO, the ISR Task Force, other elements of OSD, including the offices of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, the Assistant Secretary for Logistics and Material Readiness, and various defense agencies to identify potential solutions to the validated requirement and any challenges or risks associated with executing that solution. We then formally task the appropriate component with the responsibility to satisfy the need. Now, this is not a strictly linear process. As soon as the need is identified, the combatant commander, CENTCOM in most cases, Joint Staff, the JRAC, and the services begin collaborating to determine the most suitable way forward. Now, there are many challenges associated with compressing the requirements, budgeting, and acquisition cycle, but despite these challenges, through our urgent needs processes, the Department has provided our forces with the best force protection, command and control, counter-IED, and ISR capabilities available. Now, that is not to say that the Department is fully satisfied with our processes, with the speed at which we can field new capabilities, at our ability to anticipate the next threat, or with the efficiency with which the whole process works. In our 2010 Quadrennial Defense Review, the Department recognized a continuing need to build agile, adaptive, and innovative structures capable of quickly identifying emerging gaps and rapidly adjusting program and budgetary priorities to mitigate those gaps. Our urgent processes must provide a means of quickly prioritizing and quantifying requirements and of ensuring that the resources are available to enable rapid fielding of capabilities inside of the Department's PPBS cycle. The Department has also acknowledged and largely concurred with the findings and recommendations of the April 2010 GAO report on DoD's urgent needs processes. Contained in that report are recommendations that the Department implement a comprehensive management framework with better defined accountability to improve our responsiveness to urgent operational needs. Section 804 of the Fiscal Year 11 National Defense Authorization Act further directs the Department to conduct a complete review of the process for fielding capabilities in response to urgent operational needs, and to include consideration of earlier GAO reports and a July 2009 congressionally directed study by the Defense Science Board on the fulfillment of urgent operational needs. The legislation recommends a streamlined and tightly integrated approach to the Department's urgent needs processes, clear definition of the roles and responsibility within the Department for fulfillment of urgent needs, and the development of an expedited review process to determine which needs are appropriate for a rapid fielding process. Concurrent with the development of many of these reports, the Department has adapted its urgent processes. Beginning in 2009, the President's revised strategy in Afghanistan has served as a catalyst to initiate, if not fully implement, many of the actions recommended in the GAO reports. Among the common findings of these many reports is a perceived lack of a common management framework and clear senior leadership of our urgent needs processes. Recognizing the need for improved synergies among the multiple organizations that contribute to the counter-IED campaign, the Secretary of Defense established a counter-IED senior integration group in November 2009 to leverage the efforts of JIDO, the military services, the defense agencies, the MRAP task force, and the ISR task force. Under the leadership of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, Dr. Ashton Carter, and the Joint Staff Director of Operations, the J3, then Lieutenant General Jay Paxton, now Lieutenant General Bob Neller, the CSIG provided clear priorities and a common focus in the counter-IED fight. It quickly became clear, however, that counter-IED is not a strictly confined problem set. Multiple capabilities ranging from ISR to force protection contribute to a successful counter-IED campaign. So under the Undersecretary of Defense's AT&L, Dr. Carter's leadership, and with the Secretary's consent, the CSIG has evolved to include oversight of many of the most critical urgent needs of our operational commanders. While the evolved role of the Senior Integration Group does not yet enjoy the clarity of a written policy directive, the Senior Governance Board provides department-wide focus on expediently meeting the urgent needs of our commanders. A recent organizational change indicative of this improved senior leader focus was the realignment of my office, the Joint Rapid Acquisition Cell, from the Rapid Fielding Directorate within the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Research and Engineering to a direct report to Dr. Carter as the Undersecretary of Defense for AT&L. This organizational change has streamlined the decision process for those urgent needs submitted by the operational commanders and validated by the Joint Staff. For example, multiple urgent needs that had been identified since the beginning of this fiscal year had been languishing for lack of funding. With his direct involvement in the process, Dr. Carter was quickly able to bring the issue to the attention of Secretary Gates, who convened a meeting of the Department's leadership and made a decision to immediately fund and execute these urgent needs. Within the authorities available to the Department, $350 million was quickly realigned to support those critical needs that could be executed quickly. An additional $1 billion of requirements was also quickly sourced, but since the Department did not have the authority to reapportion these funds, a prior notification reprogramming request was submitted to Congress for approval. Please accept my thanks on behalf of the Department for your committee's quick response to this request and approval of the Part 3 for urgent needs. But unfortunately, due to the Department acting without an FY11 appropriation, the Department lacks an FY11 source to support the requested urgent operations and maintenance requirements. Nevertheless, this reprogramming action, demonstrates the Department's commitment at the very highest levels to quickly make the decisions necessary to respond to warfighter requirements. Another example of improved and focus on urgent needs is the increased use of rapid acquisition authority, which you addressed in your statement, Mr. Chairman. It was originally provided in Section 811 of the NDAA for fiscal year 2005, and it was further amended this year. Use of this authority is further identified as an interest item on your committee's oversight agenda for the 112th Congress, and I would like to take this opportunity to also thank the committee for its action in the FY11 National Defense Authorization Act that expanded this authority to include supplies as well as equipment, and more importantly, for expanding the authority from $100 million to
take the next. I'm sorry. We have 2 minutes left in our vote, so we need to recess now to go vote, and we'll finish your testimony when we return and then get the testimony from GAO. Thank you very much.